Hello, welcome back. Pirkei Avos. We are on chapter 1, Mishnah 4. Yossi ben Yoezer, Ish Tzreida. Yossi, the son of Yoezer, the man of Tzreida. Yossi ben Yochanan, Ish Yerushalayim, and Yossi ben Yochanan, the man of Yerushalayim. Kiblu mehem. They accepted it from them. As we mentioned, Pirkei Avos, we started at the beginning with the Kabbalah, with the Masorah, the tradition, from rabbi to rabbi, teacher to student, all the way back to Moses and Mount Sinai. He received it from Hashem. So Rabeinu Yonah says, who did they accept it from? Shimon HaTzadik u'me'antignos ish socho. From Shimon HaTzadik and Antignos ish socho, they were the authors of the previous Mishnah. So now we have the next sages in the line of our tradition. And this is what they said. Yossi ben Yoezer ish tzreida omer. He said, your house should be a gathering place for the sages. Ve'havi mis'abik be'avar ragleihem. And you should cleave to the dust of their feet. Ve'havi shaisa b'tzama es divreihem. And drink thirstily the words of the sages. So let's see what Rabeinu Yonah has to say. Your house should be open for the sages. When they need a place to speak with each other, you should provide them with that place where they can gather. And it's talking about a person who has a decent house for them to speak and to gather. An important person. If it's like a lowly person, you'll tell a sage to go there, he won't want to. It wouldn't be a proper respect of those that fear Hashem. So, okay, let's continue. You should cleave to cleave to the dust of their feet. Means, what does that mean, cleave to the dust of their feet? It means you should honor the sages, give them honor. How did they used to learn Gemara? How did they used to learn Torah? They used to sit before they used to stand before the sages. The sages would sit on pillows in the Beis Medrash, in the study hall. And some of the students would sit in front of them on the floor. So you'd have the rabbi up there, and you'd have the students sitting on the floor. At the dust of their feet, like it says, a certain rabbi said that there was a certain student who would sit. I guess he merited to sit during the class, and I would stand. I would serve the rabbi standing. This is what it says: be honored amongst people and honor the sages. We find that the Torah puts a very strong emphasis on honoring Torah sages. What's the reason for this? So there's a verse in Daniel that says, God gives wisdom to the wise. Why does God give wisdom to the wise? He should give wisdom to the foolish. So the reason is that only somebody who has a proper appreciation for Torah, who realizes what Torah is, can study Torah. That's the original wisdom. You give wisdom to the wise. The original wisdom that you need to study Torah is have a proper respect for Torah. And included in the respect for the Torah is respect for the sages of the Torah, because the sages are the vessels who transmit the Torah from generation to generation, especially before it was written down. You still need a Rebbe, right? Even though we have the Torah written down now. But especially before it was written down, as we learned at the beginning of Pirkei Avos, the transmission of Torah is from teacher to student and from teacher to student. So that requires to honor the teacher, because if you honor the teacher, then you're going to be you will value what he is teaching you. If you don't honor the teacher, then you won't value what he's teaching you. And part of honoring a Torah scholar is, besides the obvious speaking to him respectfully, people speak to their Rabeinu in the third person as a sign of respect. But part of it, when you respect a Torah scholar, let's say you disagree with somebody. Let's say usual disagreements. Okay, maybe that guy's wrong, maybe I'm wrong, who cares? But when you respect a Torah scholar and you start with the base assumption that he knows more than I do, and that he is coming from a place where he's studied Torah and he's mastered Torah, if you don't understand something he's saying, you realize that the problem is in you. The problem is in us, not in the teacher. People that don't respect their teachers will just poo-poo them and will the word in Hebrew is to be meshabed themselves. They won't be meshabed. They won't subjugate themselves to what the teacher is saying if they don't respect the teacher. But if you respect the teacher and you know where he's coming from, then instead of trying to prove him wrong, you will spend your efforts trying to understand what the teacher has to say, which is based on the Masorah, based on the tradition. And that's obviously you have to have a good teacher. That's the first thing. You have to have, and if you want to know how to find a good teacher, please reach out to me privately. I can set you up with many good teachers. Baruch Hashem, I know many of them. Okay, so we have to honor the sages, and actually the Torah compares to a large extent honoring Torah sages to honoring Hashem. So it's a very, very important mitzvah, and on the contrary, denigrating Torah scholars is a most serious sin. Speaking lashon hara about them, evil speech, is much worse than speaking evil about a regular person. And unfortunately, especially with the internet, people are not very careful with this at all. It's a very, very big sin, not only because of the ben adam lechaver, the fact that you're hurting another human being, but because you undermine the entire tradition of Torah and the entire respect for Torah when someone denigrates a Torah scholar. So it's a very, very, very serious sin. And I know people personally that have, I don't know them personally, but I know situations personally, just recently, where somebody publicly denigrated a Torah scholar, and a very bad thing happened to them. It's we see this, unfortunately, over and over again. People don't speak properly about Torah scholars, and bad things happen. So we all have to be very, very careful with it. Okay, let's finish the Mishnah. And drink thirstily the words of the sages. As it says, Nefesh Seveya, Tavus Naifes, Venefesh Re'eva, Kal Marmasuk. It says that someone full will trample honey, but a hungry soul, even the most bitter thing, is sweet. What does that mean? Misha who's Seveya Medivrei Torah, somebody who's full of Torah, Ve'en Chefza Behem, he doesn't want to learn, he's just full in a bad way. I feel Omrlo Margulis B'Torah, even if you tell him a beautiful Torah idea, Tavus Osa Nafsho, he'll disdain it, he won't be interested. V'Harayev, someone who's hungry, Mehenu Mis'avil, someone who loves to hear words of Torah, even if you say something without a reason, you tell him a very simple idea, Yimtak b'fiyo v'yismapo, it'll be sweet in his mouth and he'll rejoice in it. Because he knows it's true. Achar Shirabo Amro, since his Rebbe said it. So the verse is teaching us the proper attitude to have in Torah. A person should be thirsty for Torah. How are you when you're hungry and thirsty? Right? Even if you're after a fast day, you can almost eat anything and anything tastes delicious. That's how our attitude should be for Torah. Everything should be delicious. I remember many years ago I was at a wedding with Bali Shuva, people that became Orthodox and recently started learning Torah. So it's very common at weddings. You have Torah scholars talk in complex Torah ideas and share different things with each other, different svaras, different logical conclusions in the Gemara. But these students were beginners, and they were so thirsty to study Torah. What did they do? So they couldn't speak in these complex logical, let's say, Torah ideas, these lumdisha ideas. So what they did is they had learned the same Gemara, and they just said to each other the back and forth of the Gemara, called the Shakla V'Tarya. They just read the Gemara to each other by heart. It was a very beautiful thing, because they were so thirsty for Torah, even the most simple thing, which to other people they might say, oh yeah, that's obvious, I don't want to hear it. It's an obvious thing. But they had this attitude that a person should be thirsty for Torah. So even you tell somebody a halacha without a reason, it's here specifically from his Rebbe, he's just happy to hear it, especially from his Rebbe, because he knows it's true. A person should be makabel, that's part of having respect for Rebbe. When you have respect for Rebbe, you value what he says and you know that it's true. Okay, we'll finish here today, and I wish everyone a beautiful day.